Welcome to another episode of Lights, Camera, Live, where we shine a spotlight on the best and brightest marketers in the industry so you can take your business from unknown to unforgettable. So check this out. The FTC haven't updated their endorsements since 2019 until now, just recently. And let me tell you one thing, influencer marketing will never be the same. Here's the thing. Influencers are advertisers. Influencers promoting a local business can be regulated by the same laws as the world's largest companies. Did that get your attention? And here's the thing. The Federal Trade Commission, otherwise known as FTC, is not afraid to go after influencers, even those with just a handful of followers. So if you think like, hey, they're not going to catch me, they're not going to pay attention, this is something that you definitely want to pay attention to. Here's what else you need to know. With these new updates, the FTC makes its rules clear, so that way you know that it's your responsibility to follow them. Having said that, in this episode, we invited Lindsay Gamble, known as one of LinkedIn's top voices on the creator economy, to share everything that he needs to know, that you need to know about the FTC guidelines. So whether you're a brand or an influencer, everyone will walk away with something new today. So if you're just tuning in, let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm here in beautiful sunny San Diego. Well, it's about to be sunny. And it's going to be fun this afternoon for me because I'll be headed down to the convention center because for those of you that know, it is San Diego Comic-Con. So having said that, let me know where you're tuning in from. I would love to welcome you to the show. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Lindsay Gamble is the Associate Director of Influencer Innovation at Maverick, an all-in-one influencer marketing platform. With over 5 years of experience working with enterprise consumer brands on influencer marketing campaigns and a deep understanding of the creator economy, Lindsay helps brands experiment and enter new trends in the creator economy. He also writes one of my favorite weekly newsletters on LinkedIn, like no joke. I always check every Friday. So I'm like kind of curious what he's gonna like sneak in today, and breaks down what's happening in the creator economy. So whether it's news, insights, trends, whether you're into like Facebook, Instagram, Meta, TikTok, all the things, the whole gamut, he always stays on top of it. He really helps his readers cut through the noise, it's Friday, and stay up to date on the industry and know what's coming next. So having said that, let's go ahead and bring him onto the show. Lindsay, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. It's Friday, and we get to talk a little bit about influencer marketing. So thank you.
I know so much has changed. I just realized, I was like, what is today? I was like, it's July 21st. We're already like halfway past through the year. And I feel like so much has changed in the social media landscape as far as the platforms, the duels between Twitter and Threads. And now we have these new FTC guidelines, which, wow, they just dropped that last month. Like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I was out of the office, so I was supposed to be relaxed and everything, and I saw it come through as an update. And I'm like, this is big and very important, right? It's, FTC stuff and disclosures are kind of the core of influencer marketing. And so I dove in a little bit, and then I just was really excited because I noticed a lot of different changes, and was excited to kind of share it out and learn more myself.
Absolutely. I love it. So first, let's talk about what is the Federal Trade Commission? What makes them so important, the FTC?
Yeah, so they're a regulatory body that really protects. I guess the most simplest way is really protects consumers. So it's everything from what we know as influencer marketing to more traditional marketing. Paid reviews, but their ultimate goal is to protect consumers from businesses, advertising businesses, and different companies, so that consumers know when they're seeing an ad, they know when they're being pitched to, and ultimately enforce those regulations as needed.
I love that you mentioned that because how many campaigns have we seen go out and we're like, wait, is this a paid ad campaign or is this like for real, for real?
I mean, today it's harder than ever, right? With the emergence of TikTok, or not the emergence, with TikTok being a core part of everyday life, it's really hard to know if someone's working with a brand or they're just promoting a product organically.
Yeah, I remember the Fire Festival. Do you remember that? I feel like do you think that was the tipping point where the FTC was like, okay, hold on a second. We need to go back. It's been a couple of years. Like, what triggered these updates?
Yeah, I would say that's part of it. I just think a greater cultural shift of like individual creators and influencers really and their power that they're having. Everyone knows the power of a commercial or maybe the lack of a power of a commercial today. But as we gravitate towards more individuals, rules before weren't really built around that kind of new way of marketing. And so Fire Festival, I think TikTok, just the kind of greater power that social media has gained over the years really required FTC and other bodies to go back and update their policies and guides to reflect, where we are today as consumers, but marketers as well.
And it's so fascinating too because, I had Alessandro Bugliari from the Influencer Marketing Factory yesterday. You know him, right? Yeah, and he was talking about the rise of the creator economy. Like everyone is a creator. You have a smartphone in your hand, you're creating content, stories, threads, tweets, LinkedIn. If you have some type of relationship with the brand, you have to disclose it. It's not one of those things where it's like, okay, let me go deep down the rabbit hole. Let me be an investigator all of a sudden. Like who's who, what's what. So the FTC updated these guidelines. And what are some top things that people need to pay attention to? Because there was one that I was like, wait, what? You got to put an overlay on this now? And I was like, every creator is going to just be, oh, my aesthetic. So what are some top things that you noticed?
Yeah, so in the most recent updates is like maybe a handful of different things that really caught my eye. And to be honest, like the documents, uh, deep, when it comes to those type of documents, they're not super easy to understand. But from everything I've been digging at, and I continue to kind of educate myself on it, one of the biggest things is really around TikTok, right? TikTok is kind of one of the biggest platforms for influencer marketing, and with the short form video format and just how TikTok has created more creators, there's a lot of disclosures that's not happening across TikTok. And so the big thing around TikTok is that they have a branded content toggle. So you work with a brand, you can turn it on. It'll say sponsored content, a paid partnership label changes a little bit, but that's kind of their core way that they're promoting creators and brands to include disclosures. But in the latest guidelines, the FTC says that that's not enough. So whether it's TikTok or any platform, creators should be using that in-app native tool, but also including disclosure in the text, so something like ad or sponsored, and that disclosure should be visible when you first see the video. It shouldn't be after like the read more label. And
You
then the
can't be
one
like, wait, like dot, 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 dot. You can be paragraph, 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 paragraph. It has to be up front.
yeah, but that happens though. I mean, you come across. I bet you could, scroll your feed and come across a piece of sponsored content. You might see that. So that's one thing, and then the other one is really that the ad or there should be an overlay over the video, right? And that's something I see less of. There's not a lot of creators or even brands probably enforcing that aspect today, and I think that's something that's a big change from TikTok because what they have been promoting is using their brand and content toggle and not some of these additional ways of disclosure. So hopefully that changes, going forward.
You think you hope that the changes for the overlays or
Yeah,
just how
I
TikTok is
thought
going to do it?
creators, adjusting to the rules, right? It's something new. For the most part, it's always been kind of like these in-app tools or, simply sponsored or add in the text description. And now the overlay is a requirement as well. So hopefully creators get used to that and brands too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm curious on how they're going to put like the overlay on top of it. Like, what have you seen so far?
Yeah.
Di- have you seen like little tiny font size 4 ad on top? Like, what are they doing?
Well, it depends. I think when it comes to disclosures, it really depends on the brands, right? So brands, some brands are more strict with them. Some brands don't know. Sometimes, when it's a new platform, you don't know. But what I've seen when creators have disclosed uh, pay partnerships through like the video, it's just a text overlay, right? Just like you would add a
Yeah.
caption. They might say like hashtag ad or sponsored or brand ambassador. And unfortunately, sometimes you do see creators that try to hide it because, ultimately as consumers, you might be turned off from a disclosure. And so, creators are typically aware of that aspect, depending on, how much sponsored content that they're sharing with their audience.
Now, you know how always people talk about like, oh, you're getting shadow banned and all that other stuff. Do you think that algorithms pick up if you put hashtag ad or hashtag, page or sponsored? Is that a thing? Is this make believe?
No, that's funny you brought that up because I think about a month ago, TikTok came out with a resource that was kind of myth busting certain things, and that was one of it. Because when I've talked to customers, I've brands I work with, a lot of them have asked like, "Hey, is there a different way to disclose paid partnerships?" We've heard that when you add the branded content toggle or add or sponsored, it kind of suppresses the video views, and so they put out some resources around that and said that that isn't true. And I believe that too, because ultimately platforms want content to do as well as it can, because that keeps people engaged, especially with video content, right? If it's racking up a lot of views, that means it's racking up a lot of engagements. That means it's probably a piece of content that people really gravitate towards. So I say all that, but to say that I don't work for those platforms, so you never know what's going on.
You don't work for them, but I feel like you know so much. Like you know all the itty bitty details. I'm so impressed. Like how do you stay on top of that? Like, are you a part of like their media briefings, or are you just like you got Google keyword alerts?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of everything. I think just from working in the influence marketing industry for like the last 5 years, I just think it's a really important part to or important aspect to know a lot of the different parts of influencer marketing. And I think as much as you can know the perfect strategy for a campaign, if you don't know the rules and regulations, or at least have a core aspect of it so that that you're guiding customers or you're guiding your company in the right way, then you're not ultimately doing your best work. And then more importantly too, I think the core of influencer marketing is all about trust. And so we have to think about the audiences, the viewers. And so when you're working with a creator as a brand, if you're not instructing them to use the right disclosures, you're not doing yourself, you're not putting your company in the best light, because you're ultimately trying to, even if it's on purpose or by accident, you're ultimately, driving mistrust with consumers. And so for me, I try to stay up to date on a little bit of everything. I think the legal aspect, it's not the most interesting, but, it does impact the work that we do as in marketers and brands
Oh
and
yeah.
creators too.
And creators too, of course. And this goes out to all of our friends on LinkedIn too. Even if you don't self-identify as an influencer, you're still a content creator, and you could be a B2B content creator. Oftentimes I'll have friends like, "Oh, Stephanie, we just released a new white paper, a new report, right?" And I'm just like, "Okay, babe, but like, I have to disclose. I have to share things." And shout out to Brandon who's tuning in. He's saying trust is key in influencer marketing. So gotta love that. Hit you with that. That's always fun. All right. So Lindsay, we're gonna try something because you and I were trying to fix this in the green room, and I'm hoping that it's gonna look pretty. So let's see this. Okay. I think that if I could move this around, we might be able to walk through this. Is this cool? Does that work?
Sounds great.
All right, cool. So for those of you that are just tuning in, we're talking about the FTC guidelines. They were updated, I think it was like June. And here are a couple of things that you need to know. The one big thing for me was like, wow, okay, so TikTok, you need to have an overlay. And then I was gonna ask you, Lindsay, like, but is it okay if the overlay is like this little tiny thing? Because when you said you have to put hashtag ad in the very beginning, I was like, do I have to do all of it? like what's the bare minimum that a content creator could, slip by?
Yeah, I mean, with the updates, you should be kind of including disclosures from a tech standpoint, a probably even an audio standpoint, and then the traditional or now the text overlay. I mean, I think for the most part, we're used to sponsored content. I think as long as bare minimum having something that's clear, that's ad sponsored or brand partner, where if someone's seeing that piece of content, they don't have to go searching for the disclosure. It should be right there, right? So that even if the piece of content doesn't seem like an ad, they know that you're promoting it on behalf of someone else.
So for those that are following along, key requirements: disclose any type of material connections,
Yep.
make your disclosures clear. So if
Yep.
you're like, oh, I'm gonna make it tiny, I'm gonna make it the color black and then hide it in her hair, that's not gonna work. Right? And don't mix your disclosures up. It's not just only in the description, you're doing your overlays. That needs to be clear and concise basically at this point. I mean, honestly, Lindsay, at this point, Do you think that brands, or maybe you have it with your clients, but do brands have like a FTC guideline enforcer? Are they looking at their influencers and saying, hey, check, 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 you did this, or you need to go back and fix this?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All the brands I've worked with, and working at Maverick, we always want to make sure our customers are, we're helping our customers and making sure that we're following the rules, whether it's for the FTC rules or the different guidelines and rules for the different platforms. So, from a company standpoint, we have our own resources that are based on what the FTC puts out, but then also, brands have their own legal teams, and there's a lot of different nuances in some brands, especially within the financial services or healthcare, some of those sensitive industries, their disclosures have to be a little more, powerful. More, they might have some additional disclosures that creators need to include, and so they might have their own list of checklists, checklist where we're sending that to creators in the campaign brief. They're going through their content's going through draft reviews so that we're able to catch everything that they need to hit. Where maybe a food and bev company, they have less resource, or not less resource. They have kind of a streamlined way of notifying creators of what they need to disclose, which is
Mm,
add a sponsored in the caption. If it's a video, this is sponsored by so and so.
yeah.
But it really depends on the brand.
Okay. And so here's the one thing that I had found when I was like scouring the internet, because as you said before, like, though, listen, friends, that white paper, like the guidelines, is just a big block of text.
Yeah,
So, like, kudos to the crew that goes out there and like demystifies all of this.
yeah,
So, if you're like, okay, Steph, fine, I'll drop in some hashtags. You could use hashtag ad, hashtag advertisement, hashtag sponsored. But gift doesn't work. That's not okay. Thanks to, insert brand, that doesn't work. Or hashtag brand ambassador. I'm actually
yeah.
surprised by that one. Why would that not fly?
Yeah, that no. So you can't just use hashtag ambassador. You can use like Nike ambassador. So basically, this has to be based on the new guidelines that should be okay.
Okay.
But again, the guidelines are always changing. But I have seen campaigns where they'll use like not this not for Nike in particular, but like Nike ambassador, because most people know what an ambassador is. It's basically when you add the brand name into it,
Yeah.
um, you make the association with it. But to me, if I had to pick, how all brands or creators should move forward, adding sponsors is the best way. Everyone knows what those two terms mean, and I understand when brands, are working with a lot of creators, they don't want to, and also when creators are working with a lot of brands, they don't want their content to be too salesy.
Yeah.
But I think we're all used to sponsored content. I think we're all open to it. I think what happens is if I come across a piece of content and there's no disclosure, but I feel like it's a piece of content that's part of a partnership, that's where I feel like, someone's trying to get one over on me, as opposed to if they just put ad or sponsored in there. I respect that. That's how they're making money. But also, I understand that they're promoting on behalf of a brand, and what they say might, impact that based on that relationship.
Got it. Hey, and PS, by the way, if you're watching and you have questions, you're like, wait a second, am I about to get sued? Go ahead and drop them in the comments because we want to get our questions answered. Like here's the part for me, Lindsay, that I was like, but wait a second. I like, 2020 Stephanie would have looked at this and be like, okay, this flies. So this is basically, hey mom, happy Mother's Day. And then at the end, it has hashtag ad. That's what we're all used to. And so with the new FTC guidelines, it now needs to appear at the beginning of an endorsement. That's where I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like if I see that, I'm like, womp. Like automatically my perception of that piece of content goes like, is this really real? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the platform, right? So, disclosure on Twitter is going to be a little different because there's less characters. Where, like Instagram, there's like the certain amount of characters before the fold. It just really needs to be before the read more or learn more aspect, so that when you do come across it, you can see the disclosure there. To me, I mean, I think maybe because I work in marketing and I understand, I look at it from both ways. It doesn't seem like that much of an issue to me, really. But I
Uh,
do understand it as a creator. If you're if you're having to add disclosures that really take away from the impact of the content, it could feel like it's devaluing your content a little more. Maybe that is the nature of it, but when
Yeah.
you work with, but I do think, going back to what I said, like from a legal standpoint, you should always do what you should be doing based on those current guidelines. But most importantly, like if you care about your audience, you want to do what is in the best interest of the audience, and that's making them known that this is a paid partnership or whatever
Yeah.
relationship that this piece of content is part of.
Got it. And guess what, Lindsay? We got another question. So get ready for this. It says, Daryl says, who would be the parties that have standing to sue an influencer who doesn't comply? Is it the brand that gets in trouble? Is it the influencer? Is it both of them? Like who shares the brunt of that responsibility?
Yeah, it's a little different, and for the most part, the FTC compared to some of the other regulatory bodies in like the UK, like they've really kind of been hands off for the most part. I would say there's not a lot of examples of them going after creators, but based on the most recent guidelines and just kind of how they proceeded before, it could be a little bit of everything. I think ultimately the creators and the influencers are responsible for that disclosure, but in the case that it's happening repeat, and then maybe it's a big group of creators that are not including any type of disclosure on behalf of a brand, then all the parties involved in that campaign or that sponsored content are kind of at fault. I think for the most part, the what the FTC has typically done is go after the brands, right? Where they have the money, they can sue, they can make a bigger impact. But also, for agencies and platforms that are playing a role. In the UK, influencers tend to be the ones that their regulatory bodies go after a lot. Like there's a lot of examples of um, them, running ads to call out influencers that don't disclose their content, fining them, tens of thousands of dollars, doing reports and really kind of putting them on blast. So it's really interesting to see if the FTC will
They're
ever
like
take that.
hunting them. It's like a side gig
Yeah,
now.
it's really, it's really unique, and it's kind of like, is this taking it too far? But also like the UK, the UK has kind of strict policies around
Yeah.
everything, and maybe it's just the atmosphere um, around advertising and the financial space being a little more stricter than what we see in the US.
So do these guidelines, do they officially go into place the day that they are published?
Yeah,
So
so it depends on so those guidelines, current guidelines. I believe they should be live now. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Typically, what happens with a lot of the regulatory bodies will they'll put out a resource saying, "Hey, here's the proposed guidelines that we want to make." They'll go through the review process. They'll get feedback and then they'll roll them out. And so, what happened with these latest guidelines? They actually proposed a lot of these, I think, back maybe a year or so ago, and now they're just going into effect and kind of becoming official.
got it. Okay. So this is the part that I found really interesting, Lindsay, was when they were talking about videos, because obviously as a video content creator, I'm like, okay, again, I'm used to putting it in the description, not necessarily the first part, but now I know better. And so
Yeah.
this is the part that I was like, wait a second, wait, what?
Yep.
So now we're talking about long form content,
Yep.
right? So earlier, for those of you that hopped on, we talked about short form content, TikTok, basically overlay first mention in the caption, because sometimes you have limited real estate when you're looking at it. And then on Instagram, sorry babes, no more of like caption break 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 and then all your hashtags. Right?
Yep.
But so here's the one that I thought was really interesting. So for videos, again, guidelines are, it needs to be in the description, so obviously the first part, and then it needs to be spoken during the video, which I'm pretty much used to. I feel like most YouTubers will take a little break and be like, hey, PS, by the way. And then superimposed on the video. What does that mean? Like, how long superimposed? Does it have to say ad the whole entire time, or is it just beginning, middle, end? How
Yeah.
detailed do we have to be?
So these actually, it's so funny because these have existed a little bit before for YouTube. And so when I've run YouTube campaigns, I've always kind of taken that triple threat approach, and I've gotten pushback from creators and managers saying, "Hey, we've worked with this brand before, and they said this is enough." And you try to balance out pushing forward that, but ultimately saying like, here's a resource, here's how you're supposed to disclose it. Um, but to answer your question, it should be 15 to 20 seconds at the beginning of a video. So say if this was a sponsored video, I'd say, hey, this video is on behalf of Apple. Uh, so at the beginning of it, and then have it in the text, and then have it in some of the other aspects, or some of the other parts of a platform.
Got it. Okay, I was looking at one of the other questions that we have up on here too. This is from Joel. Joel is saying, "Isn't this lining up the way TV has worked for a long time? Disclose this is an advertisement upfront in the show." Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's a great way to look at it, and I think that connects to something else, right? Like, reason why the FTC is getting more aggressive, or not more aggressive, just like updating their guidelines, is because influencer content and social media is continue to rise, similar to advertising on televisions, right? So reason why there wasn't a lot of guidelines, before, because it was still relatively new, and maybe we didn't realize the impact of creators. But today it's a no brainer that a creator pushing product, as we see on TikTok all the time, they can sell out a store.
Yeah, they
Uh,
can.
so like you have to have, if that is part of a paid partnership, you need to have those similar disclosures that you would have for a commercial, which probably would have, done a similar thing, maybe a few years ago or even today.
Yeah. And so here's the other piece that I thought was really interesting is that even though these are the FTC guidelines that we're aware of, if you're in other different countries, you have to understand your local laws.
Yeah.
And so for those of you that are in Canada and the UK and Australia, definitely pay attention to these areas, figure out what you got to do there. Obviously, I'm in the US, you are too. Do you have a lot of clients that work internationally?
Yeah, in the past, I've worked with the UK is probably one of the bigger ones, and so we just adapt to their policies. For the most part, their sponsored ad does the job, and I think those customers or those clients that are in those areas, they're used to kind of more stricter guidelines around everything, and so it's not an issue from a brand standpoint. One interesting thing similar to this conversation is that if you're creating content on behalf, so say from the UK, and I'm creating content on behalf of a US brand, you have to follow those guidelines as well. And so it's not just following the guidelines in the UK, but because the guidelines switch from different regions, you have to kind of be mindful of that. And then, in a similar note, one of the other notable updates that came out in this last round of guidelines is that language. So if your caption's in Spanish, your disclosure has to match that languages, or in Spanish as well, which is really interesting because sometimes a brand will work with a creator that um, you know uh, you know puts the caption in Spanish, but they'll do their disclosure in English based on like the campaign brief.
I was like, wait a second, like what if my caption was in English and then my disclosure was in
Yeah,
Japanese?
yeah. So you do. I mean, those, and that's the thing. It's tough. Like I get it. Like even as a marketer that tries to stay up to date, like the FCC doesn't make it easy for people to understand. And if for anyone that gets a chance to go through the guidelines, or review like an overview of them, like sometimes you don't know what is right and what is wrong, and sometimes it's really nuanced too, where like you have to go with your gut. In those
Yeah.
cases, my recommendation is always always including a disclosure, even when you feel like you don't need to, because by including a disclosure in cases you might not need to, what's the biggest impact? Maybe your content doesn't perform as well, as
Yeah.
opposed to not including one and you violating those guidelines, and maybe the FTC happens to come across you if you're a bigger creator and decides to take action.
Okay. Now I got questions for you.
Yeah.
How about this? Okay, what about if you have a brand ambassador program? So we have we send out like suggested social media copy to our brand ambassadors and they send it out. I'm imagining if they put out a tweet, obviously you want to put the disclosure up front and you should be good.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah?
question? Yeah, 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 yeah. So for a tweet, correct?
Yeah. Does that
Yeah,
you still have to do that? Okay.
yeah. I
Um
mean, the tweet. I think there was an example on the document you showed. So when you're looking at well, now it changes, right? Because Twitter Blue, now you can have a tweet that's, what is it, 2,500 characters. It's like in that case you can't put it at the end, but for I would say at the beginning, but you also can put it at the end if you can still see it as if someone's coming across it. Like, um, you know, I don't think it impacts that much, so I always just would
you still read
say,
it anyway. Okay.
yeah,
Cuz I'm just thinking of how this is going to apply for like our even our own brand ambassador program, right? Because, we usually tell our clients or our brand partners, hey, here are some product updates. And if we want them to share it out, it just feels weird to say ad. I guess sponsored or brand ambassador would work is kind of what you said earlier.
Yeah, I like sponsored works. You can also say like this is in partnership with so and so. Obviously on Twitter, you only have so many characters.
Yeah.
And when I work with brands too, so I do a lot of hiking. So I worked with I have worked with Elo Bean for years, Allagash, every band Jack, and so I typically use ad or sponsored. I like sponsored because it doesn't feel so ad salesy or adsy. Um, but for the
I
most
feel
part, I
like
use
sponsored gives off this thing of like, oh, I'm good enough to be sponsored, right?
exactly
Or
exactly why I
ad.
do
I
it.
don't know why ad feels like a sellout. I don't know. There's this weird thing
It's
that happens in my brain.
Yeah, it is true, right? Like ad because like
It's
I
like,
think a lot of
ew,
times,
ad, but
um,
sponsored, like, wait, babe, how'd you get
yeah,
that like paid collab?
um, yeah, and I think you could probably like in partnership, like there's other ways to make it known, but I think when sometimes creators just say like thank you XYZ creator, like that could be part of a paid partnership, but it's not super clear. I
Yeah.
think the goal is just like if someone sees it, they should know that this is part of a paid partnership or a sponsorship as opposed to maybe organic content.
That's
And I
true.
think that changes based on some of the other captions too. Yeah,
Shout out to Brandon. Like sponsored sounds more bougie. Yeah, I think I would be like, ooh, sponsored.
yeah,
That's like you sound fancy.
yeah. I think one thing too is like I've always thought about. I'm so surprised that the social media platforms aren't being more innovative with the way that with the tools that they allow creators to provide disclosures. Like there's like the branded content tool, like the paid partnership label on Instagram, and then the branded content toggle on TikTok. But there's so many different use cases or so many different scenarios for sponsored content where like there should be maybe a drop down of different scenarios. So for creators, especially as they start to launch their own products and they promote them, they're supposed to disclose those products. But like that's not really an ad or a sponsored, right? It doesn't really fit that. And so it'd be great that if these platforms had different drop downs where like someone could say like, oh, like this is my product. This is like an affiliate post. This is like a paid partnership, like where they're actually being paid
Yeah.
cash. This is affiliate post, like basically just more categories that make it clearer so that there's less gray area for creators, brands, and viewers as like, what is this piece of content? Like what kind of
What
type of
about
relation?
like reviews and testimonials? Because you have, I mean,
Yeah.
we're both in like SaaS, so you have like these product review platforms, and then sometimes you run a campaign like, hey, here's a gift card if you fill out this review or testimonial. How does that even get disclosed for that type
Yeah.
of
So,
campaign?
and that's another big update that the FTC or added some new things around that because there's been a couple of issues with brands, getting mass reviews on Amazon and other platforms. So those all should feature disclosures as well. Whether it's like I received this product as a review campaign or someone gifted me this. But anytime that you're receiving any type of product or compensation for doing something on behalf of a brand or individual, there always needs to be some disclosure there. And some of the, um, what we do at Maverick, we do ratings reviews. So we have partnerships with some of the review platforms where we have an integration where we can send out a link to those creators. They can leave a review like, hey, I love this product, I love the way it tastes, yada yada, and that will automatically generate a disclosure on those platforms as well. And then Amazon has something similar too, where you can know when a review is part of a brand campaign or free product as opposed to me buying a product and leaving a review. So same scenario.
Yeah, I feel like my friends on Amazon, all the Amazon influencers that do whether it's like the shoppable videos or the live streams, they're very clear. They say it really fast too. They're like, just full disclosure, this was gifted to me by blah blah blah. All reviews are my own. And I was like, damn, that was like the fastest I ever heard you speak. And it was like I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
just got to check the box, right?
I know, get it done. Okay, so for those of you that are tuning in, we've talked about everything as far as the FTC guidelines. I feel like we talked a lot about TikTok too,
Yeah.
because in the vertical video format, I mean, I get it, right? Because your real estate for the captions are so small, so I do understand having the overlay on top of that. So that would obviously apply to YouTube Shorts. That's also going to apply to your Instagram Reels. We talked about brand ambassadors. Brand ambassadors are still influencers, whether you're in B2B or B2C, you're a content creator, whatever partnership you have, CYA, right? Cover yo
Yeah.
and make sure you get it done. Shout out to Gary Ware, who's saying that he's sold. He wants to be aware of that too. Is there anything else that influencers should be aware of? Like, is it are influencer management agencies, or they're like, look, listen, I already told you this the first time, 3 strikes and you're out of the program. Like, how strict are management companies going to be and brands?
Yeah. I mean, I think going forward, because it could, a brand doesn't want to risk, being sued or the FTC taking action on them or whatever body it is. And so, I think as marketers, like, whether you're working for a company yourself or on behalf of a platform, like, it's our job to educate ourselves and enforce those disclosures. And as I said before, like, I've encountered creators that, kind of want to do a disclosure that's a little, it meets the criteria, but it's kind of not the right thing. And
It's sus, Lindsay. It's sus. You're like, look, I know what you're trying to do. I would try to do
yeah,
the same thing too.
but the thing is, right? Why do they want to do that, right? Because there's this idea as a general, like, the masses, that, like, sponsored content is right? And so if we kind of just took sponsored content as a way for someone making money, and, like, we know that they're being paid for that, regardless if it's in free product or thousands of dollars, like, that's what they're doing to make a living. And, like, if
Hmm.
that's content, like, why do we care if someone else is making money off of it, long as they're providing that disclosure?
Yeah.
If there wasn't that kind of negative pushback from some people, then creators have no reason to hide disclosures, right? Or to try to kind of do workarounds. Or same thing for brands too.
Yeah. Everyone
Yeah.
trying to find these legal loopholes, just be upfront, be honest. Actually, I
Yeah.
find I find the TikTok videos where it's an honest review. They're like, "Look, I'm not even getting paid for this. I should be
Yeah.
getting paid for this." And
Cool.
then they're like, "I should," cuz
Yeah.
those are the ones that I enjoy watching too. I would say of all the sponsored content that is out there, the ones that I think really do a good job, maybe it's just because a lot of my friends are YouTubers, it's just so clean. Like they'll have their long form video content and they're like, hey, I just want to tell you real quick, this is sponsored by blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, okay, cool, awesome, great.
Yeah.
And you,
Right?
you,
Like, yeah.
you go through it. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
like, go
There's
get paid.
Yeah, for sure. I know we talked a lot about TikTok, but also one thing I don't think we said was, so one of the most interesting thing was in the new guidelines is around de-influencing. And so, when say if I have a partnership with, I'll just use a beauty brand, since that's the
Just
first
make up
thing.
a brand.
But if I do a defluencing video and I talk about, oh, you shouldn't get this product, you should get another one. If I have a relationship with a brand that's in that same space, I need to make that known to that audience in that video, because what I say about another brand, can potentially impact my relationship with the brand that I have a partnership with, which is really unique, right? It's kind of confusing, but, like, if you're talking bad about another brand, but you have in that same space, but you have a relationship with a brand that's a competitor, viewers may have a different take on what you're saying, knowing that you have a partnership with Nike and you're talking about Adidas. And so
Oh, so
that's,
you're like, you can't do a shade campaign.
yeah, well, you could do those, but the FTC says there has to be disclosure around that now, which is something that I didn't think anything about until I read that. But it does make sense, especially with that type of content and the whole kind of emergence of de-influencing.
That's true. I didn't even think about the de-influencing piece of it. I mean, I feel like that's a new Webster word terminology. Like, didn't that just come out like in Q1? Like
Yeah,
de-influencing?
yeah. Well, I
Interesting.
mean, it really is just influencing, right? But saying don't use this, use that, and so
Yeah.
new word, but same concept, and that's why I think it makes sense to have a disclosure with those type of videos as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen now? with all these FTC guidelines? Because when you were talking about like how the UK is very strict, and now there's campaigns where like, hey, help me find,
Yeah.
campaigns like this. Are we going to see that type of behavior shift over into the US or other parts?
Yeah, I mean the U.S. I don't. I mean, compared to like, they haven't done much today. I do think that there's more attention on creators and influencer marketing in particular. So um, there's going to be more around that. I think, especially when it comes to like those industries like finance and healthcare, where like creators promoting a certain product or service can really impact a lot. We saw that with a
Yeah.
lot of the crypto companies.
I was just about to say that. I was like, what triggered all this? And I was like, was it that whole like cryptocurrency thing that went down?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, especially in those industries. I think the FTC and like the SEC and some of the adjacent regulatory bodies, like there's a lot of tension on social media and the role it's playing in those, because a lot of like that's becoming the primary way for people to find out about that, and they're going to their favorite creator or a
Oh,
favorite
for sure.
brand or a favorite collective to learn about those, and so. Um, I think we could see more. We already seen a few different scenarios, like Kim Kardashian being sued by the SEC for her cryptocurrency promotion. There was like 8 influencers that um, were charged with, 100 million, like uh, pump and dump scheme and all these different things.
Yeah.
And I think the U.S. the government is pretty slow to adapt to new and emerging things. So I expect a little more to happen, but nothing to probably compare to what's going on in the UK.
Yeah.
Um, but across the world, in India, China, there's so many different like new regulations for influencers, and some are like really extreme. Where like I think it's in India, or France, or maybe India, France. Um, Creators can go to jail if they don't disclose, and so like
No, really?
yeah, and so it's really like they're not just guidelines in certain areas.
Man, they're gonna be in jail and they're like, check out my orange suit. Let me show you. And they're gonna do get ready with me.
Yeah, the biggest thing is like how are they going to kind of moderate it, right? Like
Yeah.
this content that's going to be pushed out that people don't come across, and I think they'll probably continue to start with the celebrities and high profile creators and brands. Will they ever go down to a smaller creator? The person that has 5,000 followers that is promoting something that maybe only reaches a few thousand. Not today, but I would say like just educate yourself as a marketer, creator, brand, so that when that day does come, that you're already kind of doing best practices.
Got it. Cool. And so I know that you speak at a lot of events. You spoke at the University of Missouri St. Louis. You're over at MDMC. That's fam over there. Those are some good
Yeah,
people.
you went, right?
I've spoken at there plenty of
Yeah.
times. This was the one year that I didn't get to go, and my coworker went, Mike Alton, which you probably know. I
Yeah,
think he's
yeah,
on the
yeah,
same
yeah,
panel
yeah,
with you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I need to go hit up Lindsay because your newsletter it's so precise, so particular. I actually share it with my team. I'm like, hey, FTC guidelines. We
Thank
got
God.
we got to do this. So tell people where they can learn more about you. Tell them about your newsletter, your next speaking engagement. Where can we
Sure.
get more of you?
Yeah. Yeah. So lindsaygamble.com. So I've been writing a newsletter for about a year and a half now. It's available on LinkedIn. There's also an email version. Love for you to subscribe to either one. Subscribe to both if you want. That comes out pretty much every Friday. Today's hasn't come out yet. I have to send it out, but pretty much every week. I join podcasts. I don't have any more speaking engagements. I've done a couple in the last couple of months that have been really great. But if anyone's out there that has some type of opportunity, reach out. But for the most part, LinkedIn, Twitter, a newsletter, website, and then we're doing some stuff at Maverick too. If you're interested in that.
Yeah, I need to check out Maverick too and see how you guys are doing the influencer campaigns. And
Yeah.
having said that, Lindsay, this has been so much fun. Thanks for geeking out with me. I know that you've been traveling and you've been going from one place to the other, and you're like, Friday, 9 a.m. Is this good? Well, 9 a.m. for me, 12
Yeah.
o'clock for you. So you're already ahead of me in the future. But thank you so much for your time. For again, anyone else that has any questions about FTC guidelines, this is the person to go to. Okay, I'm always like scouring his newsletters and all of the different things. So, any questions about FTC guidelines, or not only that, just the creator economy. What was the last thing? Were you in Business Insider? Like, where were you? As featured
Uh,
on, sir, where were you?
oh, you're gonna make me blush. A couple of
You're
Business
like, wait a
Insider.
second, I got a whole
Uh,
media kit, Steph.
I'm very thankful for those opportunities. So like,
Yeah,
yeah, Business Insider's top creator economy experts and influence or creator economy and influencer marketing experts. So
see, there you
yeah,
go.
there's been a couple of things, but I'm really thankful for that because about 5 years ago, I was trying to beg someone to let me, to give me a job in social media. I'm like, I always knew that I had the skills for it, but no one would ever hire me because I don't know, I didn't have an internship. So it's really nice to be able to, be ideally, a good place in my career and try to make some impact. And I'm just enjoying it and always learning as well.
Love it. Well, thank you always for taking the time because I know newsletters are not easy, even with ChatGPT. It's like,
Oh,
how do I make people care about this? And it's
yeah.
it's been exciting to see your newsletter grow week after week because I'm like, oh, look at that! Like the numbers spiked, and it's like, hey, go you! But
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll go from there. So you guys, bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Bye.